The Scarlet Ibis by James Hurst. It was in the clove of seasons. Summer was dead, but autumn had not yet been born, that the ibis lit in the bleeding tree.
All right, first question. A clove is a division or split of some kind. During what time of year does this story take place? So it clearly takes place when summer is turning to autumn.
Flower garden was strained with rotting brown magnolia petals, and ironweeds grew rank amid the purple phlox. The 5 o'clocks by the chimney still marked time, but the oriole nest in the elm was untenanted and rocked back and forth like an empty cradle. The last graveyard flowers were blooming, and their smell drifted across the cotton field and through every room of our house, speaking softly the names of our dead.
So it asks us to reread the narrator's description of the garden and underline phrases that bring to mind death or dying. All right, so we clearly have some foreshadowing going on, right? Summer was dead, right? We underline that. Rotting brown petals. No one is in the nest, right? Empty, they compared to an empty cradle. And it concludes with speaking softly the names of our dead.
It's strange that all this is still so clear to me, now that summer has long since fled and time has had its way. A grindstone stands where the bleeding tree stood, just outside the kitchen door. And now, if an oriole sings in the elm, its song seems to die up in the leaves, a silvery dust. The flower garden is prim, the house a gleaming white, and the pale fence across the yard stands straight and spruce. But sometimes, like right now, as I sit in the cool, green-draped parlor, the grindstone begins to turn, and time with all its changes is ground away, and I remember Doodle.
All right, so we have two characters, right? Main character number one is our narrator, who is either referred to as I or me or the narrator or sometimes brother. And then we have a little brother, and his name is Doodle.
Doodle was just about the craziest brother a boy ever had. Of course, he wasn't crazy like old Miss Leedy, who was in love with President Wilson and wrote him a letter every day, but was a nice crazy, like someone you meet in your dreams. He was...
All right, so it says underline the detail that tells us the story takes place in the past. President Wilson, okay? This is not a president that we are familiar with in the present, okay? Looking ahead, it says in lines 32 through 33, so that's down here, the narrator compares his brother's given name to a big tail and a small kite. What does the simile tell you about the narrator's opinion of his brother's name?
I was born when I was 6 and was, from the outset, a disappointment. He seemed all head with a tiny body which was red and shriveled like an old man's. Everybody thought he was going to die. Everybody except Aunt Nicey, who had delivered him. She said he would live because he was born in a caul, and cauls were made from Jesus' nightgown. Daddy had Mr. Heath, the carpenter, build a little mahogany coffin for him. But he didn't die. And when he was 3 months old, Mama and Daddy decided they might as well name him. They named him William Armstrong, which is like tying a big tail on a small kite. All
right, so this very weak baby is named William Armstrong. So the simile here suggests that the narrator thinks the name William Armstrong is too weighty and important sounding for a child as physically weak as his brother.
The name sounds good only on a tombstone. I thought myself pretty smart at many things, like holding my breath, running, jumping, or climbing the vines in Old Woman Swamp, and I wanted more than anything else someone to race to Horsehead Landing, someone to box with, and someone to perch with in the top fork of the great pine behind the barn, where across the fields and swamps you could see the sea. I wanted a brother.
All right, so it says, what does the narrator want? Underline what you want to find out. He wants more than anyone else someone to play with, right? Somebody to race with, someone to sit with on top of a great tree. He wants a brother, somebody that he thinks that he can play with.
But Mama, crying, told me that even if William Armstrong lived, he would never do these things with me. He might not, she sobbed, even be all there. He might, as long as he lived, lie on the rubber sheet in the center of the bed in the front bedroom where the white marquisette curtains billowed out in the afternoon sea breeze, rustling like palmetto fronds. It was bad enough having an invalid brother, but having one who possibly was not all there was unbearable. So I began to make plans to kill him by smothering him with a pillow. However,
We're in an exclamation point here, right? Big Brother is very disappointed to have Doodle as a brother.
afternoon, as I watched him, my head poked between the iron posts of the foot of the bed. He looked straight at me and grinned. I skipped through the rooms, down the echoing halls, shouting, "Mama, he smiled. He's all there. He's all there." And he was.
So he's relieved. Why is it so important to the narrator that his brother is all there? The narrator wants Doodle to develop normally, so they can play together.
When he was 2, if you laid him on his stomach, he began to move himself, straining terribly. The doctor said that with his weak heart, this strain would probably kill him, but it didn't. Trembling, he'd push himself up, turning first red, then a soft purple, and finally collapse back onto the bed like an old worn-out doll. I can
So what does this tell us about Doodle? He's not physically strong, right? He's a weak child.
still see Mama watching him, her hand pressed tight across her mouth, her eyes wide and unblinking. But he learned to crawl. It was his 3rd winter, and we brought him out of the front bedroom, putting him on the rug before the fireplace. For the first time, he became one of us. As long as he lay all the time in bed, we called him William Armstrong, even though it was formal and sounded as if we were referring to one of our ancestors. But with his creeping around on the deerskin rug and beginning to talk, something had to be done about his name. It was I who renamed him. When he crawled backwards, as if he were in reverse and couldn't change gears. If you called him, he'd turn around as if he were going in the other direction. Then he'd back right up to you to be picked up. Crawling backward made him look like a doodlebug, so I began to call him Doodle. And in time, even Mama and Daddy thought it was a better name than William Armstrong. Only Aunt Nicey disagreed. She said call babies should be treated with special respect since they might turn out to be saints. Renaming my...
Alright, so why doesn't Aunt Nicey like Doodle's nickname? So she says that the name does not show enough respect for babies like Doodle, who are often blessed or gifted in some way.
Brother was perhaps the kindest thing I ever did for him, because nobody expects much from someone called Doodle. Although Doodle learned to crawl, he showed no signs of walking, but he wasn't idle. He talked so much that we all quit listening to what he said. It was about this time that Daddy built him a go-kart, and I had to pull him around. At first,
All right, so what does the narrator transport doodling? Underline the sentence where you find out, and here we go. It was about this time that Daddy built him a go-kart, and I had to pull him around. So that's how he's transported by his brother.
I just paraded him up and down the piazza. But then he started crying to be taken out into the yard, and it ended up by my having to lug him wherever I went. If I so much as picked up my cap, he'd start crying to go with me, and Mama would call from where she was, "Take Doodle with you." He was a burden in many ways. The doctor had
All right, so for these lines, we're looking for this answer. Describe the narrator and his brother as they might look to an observer, so somebody outside of them.
said that he mustn't get too excited, too hot, too cold, or too tired, and that he must always be treated gently. A long list of don'ts went with him, all of which I ignored once we got out of the house. To discourage his coming with me, I'd run with him across the ends of the cotton rows and careen him around corners on 2 wheels. Sometimes I accidentally turned him over, but he never told Mama. His skin was very sensitive, and he had to wear a big straw hat whenever he went out. When the going got rough and he had to cling to the sides of the go-kart, the hat slipped all the way down over his ears.
All right, so adorable, right? What I would say here is the narrator is a normal-sized boy. So the narrator, I mean my. But Doodle is tiny, even for his age. The narrator is pulling Doodle behind him in a homemade cart. He is going very fast. And Doodle is grasping the sides of the cart. Doodle is wearing a big hat that has slipped down over his ears.
He was a sight. Finally, I could see I was licked. Doodle was my brother, and he was going to cling to me forever, no matter what I did. So I dragged him across the burning cotton field to share with him the only beauty I knew, Old Woman Swamp. I pulled the go-kart through the sawtooth fern, down into the green dimness where the palmetto fronds whispered by the stream. I lifted him out and set him down in the soft rubber grass beside a tall pine. His eyes were round with wonder as he gazed about him, and his little hands began to stroke the rubber grass. Then he began to cry. "For heaven's sake, what's the matter?" I asked, annoyed. "It's so pretty," he said, "so pretty."
All right, so reread the lines in 108 to 112 and circle the details that help you infer Doodle's character traits. What are they? So I circled that his eyes are real big and round like a baby's, and he has little hands, and they're rubbing the grass, and he's weeping, and he's looking at it and he's saying it's so pretty. So I would say that he is emotional and responsive to beauty.
Pretty, pretty, pretty. After that day, Doodle and I often went down into Old Woman's Swamp. I would gather wildflowers, wild violets, honeysuckle, yellow jasmine, snake flowers, and water lilies, and with wiregrass, we'd weave them into necklaces and crowns. We'd bedeck ourselves with our handiwork and loll about thus beautified, beyond the touch of the everyday world. Then when the slanted rays of the sun burned orange in the tops of the pines, we'd drop our jewels into the stream and watch them float away toward the sea. There is within me, and with sadness I have watched it in others, a knot of cruelty born by the stream of love, much as our blood sometimes bears the seed of our destruction, and at times I was mean to Doodle.
All right, so this goes back to our question of why do we hurt the ones we love? All right, and it says to reread those lines, and what is he saying about the relationship between love and cruelty? So what the narrator's saying, the narrator is saying that cruelty can spring from love.
One day I took him up to the barn loft and showed him his casket, telling him how we all had believed he would die. It was covered with a film of Paris green sprinkled to kill the rats, and screech owls had built a nest inside it. Doodle studied the mahogany box for a long time. Then he said, "It's not mine." "It is," I said, "and before I'll help you down from the loft, you're going to have to touch it." "I won't touch it," he said sullenly. "Then I'll leave you here by yourself," I threatened, and made as if I were going down. Doodle was...
All right, so he's being very cruel, and you can see that he's really hurting Doodle, right? He's sad, he's gloomy, he's telling him, like, this is your coffin, touch your coffin.
Was frightened of being left. "Don't leave me, brother," he cried, and leaned toward the coffin, his hand trembling. Reached out, and when he touched the casket, he screamed. A screech owl flapped out of the box into our faces, scaring us and covering us with Paris green. Doodle was paralyzed, so I put him on my shoulder and carried him down the ladder, and even when we were outside in the bright sunshine, he clung to me, crying, "Don't leave me, don't leave me."
So in typical little brother fashion, Doodle asks his brother not to leave him. It says, why do you think the narrator shows Doodle's coffin? What might this event foreshadow? So the narrator is being downright mean to Doodle. Perhaps he is trying to scare Doodle so that Doodle will do what the narrator wants him to do. This may foreshadow that at some point in the story, as much as it pains me to say, one of these two, either the narrator or Doodle, may die.
When Doodle was 5 years old, I was embarrassed at having a brother of that age who couldn't walk, so I set out to teach him. We were down an old woman's swamp, and it was spring.
Teach him. I've added a note here that says the narrator has confessed to being embarrassed of his little brother, and this is Old Woman Swamp. Which seems to be a pretty symbolic setting.
And the sick, sweet smell of bay flowers hung everywhere like a mournful song. I'm going to...
All right, so it says underline the simile and explain what two things are being compared. So, the sick, sweet smell of bay flowers hung everywhere like a mournful song. So I would say, in terms of what two things are being compared, the scent of the flowers is compared to a mournful song. Quotes. The simile here suggests the hymns sung at funerals.
Teach you to walk, Doodle, I said. He was sitting comfortably on the soft grass, leaning back against the pine. Why? He asked. I hadn't expected such an answer, so I won't have to haul you around all the time. I can't walk, brother, he said. Who says so? I demanded. Mama, the doctor, everybody. Oh, you can walk, I said, and I took him by the arms and stood him up. He collapsed onto the grass like a half-empty flour sack. It was as if he had no bones in his little legs. Don't hurt me, brother, he warned. Shut up. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to teach you to walk. I heaved him up again, and again he collapsed.
All right, so is this tough love? Is this cruelty? Is this good for him? Is this bad for him?
This time he did not lift his face up out of the rubber grass. I just can't do it. Let's make honeysuckle wreaths. Oh, yes, you can, Doodle, I said. All you got to do is try. Now, come on. And I hauled him up once more. It seemed so hopeless from the beginning that it's a miracle I didn't give up. But all of us must have something or someone to be proud of, and Doodle had become mine. I did not know then that pride is a wonderful, terrible thing, a seed that bears two vines, life and death. Every day that summer, we went to the pine beside the stream.
All right. Pride. Okay. So it says, underline the two statements the narrator makes about pride. But all of us have something or someone to be proud of, and Doodle had become mine. I did not know that pride is a wonderful, terrible, so two unlike things, a seed that bears two vines, life and death. So what is he saying here? He says that everyone, no matter who you are, wants to be proud of someone or something. He also says that pride brings both good things and bad consequences. So there's double-edged sword there.
Of Old Woman Swamp, and I put him on his feet at least 100 times each afternoon. Occasionally, I too became discouraged because it didn't seem as if he was trying, and I would say, Doodle, don't you want to learn to walk? He'd nod his head, and I'd say, well, if you don't keep trying, you'll never learn. Then I'd paint for him a picture of us as old men, white-haired, him with a long white beard, and me still pulling him around in the go-kart. This never failed to make him try again. Finally, one day, after many weeks of practicing, he stood alone for a few seconds. When he fell, I grabbed him in my arms and hugged him, our laughter pealing through the swamp like a ringing bell. Now we knew it could be done. Hope no longer hid in the dark palmetto thicket, but perched like a cardinal in the lacy toothbrush tree, brilliantly visible. Yes, I could.
All right. So underline the simile in lines 184 to 186. What does it mean? So the simile is comparing hope to a cardinal whose brilliant red color suggests a powerful life force. And this is interesting because this seems to be an allusion to a poem that was written in 1891 by Emily Dickinson. All right, it's a very short poem, but it shows us that a lot of times birds and hope are kind of lined up one and the same. So brief poem, it says, hope is the thing with feathers, that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. And sweetest in the gale is heard, and sore must be the storm that could abash the little bird that kept so many warm. I've heard it in the chillest land and on the stranger sea, yet never in extremity it asked a crumb of me.
Cried, and he cried it too, and the grass beneath us was soft, and the smell of the swamp was sweet. With success so imminent, we decided not to tell anyone until he could actually walk. Each day, barring rain, we sneaked into Old Woman's Swamp, and by cotton picking time, Doodle was ready to show what he could do. He still wasn't able to walk far, but we could wait no longer. Keeping a nice secret is very hard to do, like holding your breath. We chose to reveal all on October 8th, Doodle's 6th birthday, and for weeks ahead we mooned around the house, promising everybody a most spectacular surprise. Aunt Nicey said that, after so much talk, if we produced anything less tremendous than the resurrection, she was going to be disappointed.